Hello and welcome to the Steel Sports Show, the U Sports podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Klinkenbeard. Pleased to be joined, as always, by my fellow co-host, Martin Brown. Martin, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Nathan. I'm joining you today from the wonderful New York City. Awesome place to be at this time of year, particularly when you've got kids. The festivities are pretty awesome. So spending yesterday and today in New York, just exploring the sights around Christmas time. So how are you doing?
Doing well, doing very well. You going to get a chance to see the tree or anything at Rockefeller Center?
Yeah, that's the plan today. We're gonna go. We have a bit of a tradition in my household. We'll come in. We do the tree. We go to Bryant Park, and then we go down to the English fish and chip shop in the village and get dinner. Traditional fish and chips. So that's the tradition we've done for quite a while. So try and keep some of my English heritage, passing on to my very much American kids. So, but it's fun. It's fun times.
I love it.
How was
Sounds
how was your weekend?
very good. Yeah, it's my daughter had a swim meet, so we were traveling back and forth to that and enjoying that at Purdue. Um, yeah, so that took up pretty much the whole weekend, and then we enjoyed dinner out as a family when we got home. But yeah, the sports never end. So she
Yeah.
actually missed a softball practice. Like softball is already getting started, getting into some winter
Oh,
workouts and getting ready for the spring season.
it
So
just keeps going and going, yeah, doesn't it? Um, well, kick
yeah.
us off with our baseball news. This obviously we're in the off season, but there's always a little bit of news filtering through before we get to soccer. And I know we have a real good special guest who will be joining us. Wrote an excellent article. We'll talk a little bit about later. So excited to have him on. We'll get him on and talk a little bit about the soccer portion of the show. But kick us off with some of the baseball news.
Yeah, I think the big piece of news was obviously Juan Soto, and obviously he had been courted by a number of teams, and with how high his contract was going to be, only a few teams, right, were in the mix. The usual players like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Red Sox, even the Blue Jays, who the last couple of years have really thrown their hat in the ring and wanting to spend money, but haven't been able to get those deals across the line. But yeah, so finally happens. He signs. He goes to the crosstown New York Mets, leaves the Yankees, and signs a historic deal. 15 years, $765 million. Largest deal in Major League Baseball history. And we've seen some of these contracts. Some of these athletes are starting to try to defer payments, and we saw it with Otani, and he's going to be paid for the next 3 decades by the Dodgers, and this contract isn't like that. He doesn't have any deferred payments. He gets a $75 million signing bonus, and he even has an opt out clause in 5 years. So in 5 years, he could come back and say, "Well, I should be paid more," and
Right.
the Mets could even kick up the deal past 800 million. So just mind-boggling numbers, and now we get to the point where who's going to be who's going to be that first billion
Brilliant.
dollar athlete, because
Do you
we're
think?
slowly inching toward that.
Do you think? I mean, I know Soto's a very, very good player. Obviously, courted by a lot of teams, and speaking from an kind of I would say a reasonable baseball watcher. Across the course, I keep up with the news, watch a fair few games on TV. But I wouldn't. I'm not. I'm certainly not. I would describe myself as a diehard baseball fan. I am a fan. But looking at it from a coach's perspective, I look at someone like Otani, right? And I know it was a couple of years, well, it was really only a year ago, and things are moving fast. But somebody of him who's base stealing, pitching, hitting, is Juan Soto that much better than Otani? For me, from just looking at it from that perspective, I'm like, Otani's just the whole package. Like he should be the top of the top in terms of payment, or have we just moved on another year and it's just a little bit of inflation and just a new deal? What do you take on that?
I think that's what it is. I think we see that in
Yeah.
other sports too. It just, yeah, so Otani's the best player in baseball. And, I'm sorry, but Juan Soto yes, he's going to be paid 765 million, but he's not better than Otani, and I don't think you can look at that just based off the contract alone. But we're seeing it in other sports too. I mean, you look at someone like Patrick Mahomes and the deal that
Yeah.
he signed, and it's just almost year after year, the value continues to increase. For if it's a star slugger, a star quarterback, whoever it may be, you just see these deals, continuing to increase in value. And yeah, I mean, I at the end of the day, I don't really think it's just about how good you are. It's just and it's the sports franchises too.
Yeah.
These owners, the worth of these franchises just continue to balloon year after year, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it certainly is, and you just wonder is it ever going to get to a point where the bubble is going to burst, or are we going to see 1.5, 1.7, $2 billion contracts in the next 3, 4, 5 years in any of these sports, whether it be the NBA, whether it be the NFL, whether it be baseball. I certainly feel we've had this conversation before. I think the baseball players certainly get paid because they maybe can't get as much on the endorsement side due to their schedule. You see plenty of NFL, and NBA players with endorsements with athletic companies, commercials on TV. You don't see that as much. So I think there's definitely maybe a lesser an area for revenue, for those MLB players. So I don't know if that's a factor in the Major League Baseball world, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. Is that bubble going to burst at some point? Are these values of these franchises going to top out and burst at some point, or is it just going to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going?
Yeah.
And at some point, that spending from the owners are going to be looked to be recouped, and who's going to pay? It's going to be the fan, it's going to be the TV companies. So what happens, on that side of it, and that's going to be interesting.
200 to park at, yeah, you might be
Right,
paying $200 to park at Citi Field and
right.
$20 for a hot dog.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, and it does that put people off? We'll see. I mean, it's going to be an interesting next 5 years. I think you've got it's also being, I think, bumped up by all of this. The money in college sports with the NIL era coming into play. So athletes are used to making money, and that's just driving it up all the way up to the pros. It's going to be interesting to see how that continues over the next 5 years. But certainly, a good. The Mets certainly got one over, I think, the Yankees on that deal, and we'll see how he does. When you sign a deal like that, you better deliver numbers, right? And the Mets fans are not going to be super patient if things aren't going well by the All-Star break, I tell you.
I mean, they certainly want to win, and Steve Cohen's been opening up his pocketbooks to get whoever he wants, and try to field the team that could ultimately win the World Series. I know they made the NLCS. They've really been pushing hard. They had a good season this year. Have a good manager in place that I think the players have responded to, and yeah, well, I guess we'll see. 15 years is a long time, so better come through in the first portion of that deal. Especially as these athletes age, and by the time he's 40, I don't know if he's going to be worth 51 million, but
Yeah,
we shall see.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. We do have a little bit of team steel news that we're excited about. Just hired a new pitching coach. Something that we haven't had in our organization before, but I think is going to really take us to the next level. Young man Jacob Doris, who spent 4 years in the Houston Astros organization, was a right-handed relief pitcher, and he's made a couple stops after his career ended. His pitching career ended in 2018, but has been with the New York Mets. Has also been in the Chicago White Sox organization as well. And I think we're just really excited to have him on board to really help further our pitchers, help develop them, give them the tools they need to really succeed and improve. And especially our athletes in middle school, high school, that are going to be looking to get to the next level too. I think he's going to be able to provide incredible insights and working with all of our team steel coaches across the country. So I know it's something we're certainly excited about to bring him in the fold.
Definitely. I mean, it's such a specialized position. We're excited to get someone of his expertise working with our coaches, working with our athletes, particularly in that position. Baseball is such in many ways a different game from a lot of the sports in terms of that specialization in certain areas of the field, all over the field, really. And pitching obviously being one. teams can be made or broken by the level of their pitching. And I think having someone like Jacob come in and help our coaches, help our athletes develop a really good, strong curriculum for our pitchers is going to be something that's going to be really useful. And I think we'll see some real good development from our athletes because of what he brings. So excited to have him as part of Team Steel.
Definitely, yeah. So certainly excited to see what he can bring to the table. Especially next season and beyond, working with our athletes and coaches. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, switching gears to to the soccer side, I'm going to introduce our guest shortly. But before we get to him, we had the MLS Cup final. LA Galaxy secured their record-breaking sixth MLS Cup title with a 2-1 win over the New York Red Bulls. It was a good game. A lot of the time these finals are a little bit cagey, a little bit. Can be a little boring sometimes as people played not to lose them, but I thought it was a relatively good game. Galaxy took control early with a Painsil opening goal in the 9th minute. Got a second 4 minutes later from Jolovic. Red Bulls did come back in the game, and I thought they would actually going to push on and get an equalizer in that second half. But Galaxy's, to be fair, their defense really stepped up, did well in that second half. And on the balance of it, they certainly, I think, deserved the win and to win the MLS. It certainly puts an interesting perspective, as we've talked about before, on that World Club Cup next year with Inter Miami as the MLS representative, even though LA Galaxy are the MLS Cup champs. I would interesting to see if there's any legal action going to be taken by the Galaxy to try and get into that competition based upon FIFA seem to do whatever they want, but good game, well-deserved. Congratulations to the LA Galaxy. It's a long season. Gaston Brugman, the midfielder who had the opening assist, was the MLS Cup MVP. He really dominated that midfield area. And I think it really puts, with all these kind of new franchises we've talked about that have come up and done well, I think you've got an older franchise, with the LA Galaxy, back on the map and really solidifies their status, I think, as one of the best franchises in MLS. But what was your take on the game?
Yeah, like you said, LA Galaxy, since they've joined MLS, have been kind of just one of the stalwarts in the league, and winning cups and making the playoffs and having just consistency year over year. So yeah, I mean, for me, it would have been a little rough if Red Bulls were a 7 seed, right? So I mean, that would have been quite the Cinderella story to go.
It would have been, yes.
The MLS Cup, but no, I think the LA Galaxy. I mean, they had a strong season. Certainly played well through the playoffs. Got a win over LAFC to make the final. But yeah, I certainly think they were a class above the Red Bulls. So kudos to them. I mean, they keep showing their class as an organization.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And the other big news in the soccer world this week was the announcements and the awarding of the 2030 and 2034 World Cup. Of course, the 2026 World Cup will be held right here in the United States in less than 2 years now, about 18 months or so, with the final being right outside where I am at MetLife Stadium. The 2030 World Cup, first time it's gone across continents. So it'll be held in both Europe and Africa. It'll be jointly hosted by Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. However, there will be a handful of games. The opening matches will also take place in South America, in Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay. And actually, this means the tournament will be conducted across 6 countries on 3 continents for the first time. And of course, the reason it will take place in South America is to commemorate 100 years since the very first World Cup, which took place in South America in 1930. So I think certainly going to be a good tournament. I like the way that they've had a nod to 100 years. It's a tournament that there's not many of these world type of tournaments. Probably the Olympics is the only one that can span that sort of time. And it was certainly less controversial, I would say, than the 2034 World Cup. I think being the only bidder for the 2034 World Cup. Saudi Arabia was obviously awarded. Australia withdrew its potential bid. We do expect them to bid for it in 2038. And obviously, I would say it's a little controversial, just given Saudi Arabia's history. But I will say that there certainly were issues with the Qatar World Cup in terms of workers and migrant workers and human rights and safety records. And hopefully that this is something that Saudi Arabia can better than Qatar. But the actual tournament itself in Qatar was very well run. Stadiums were excellent. I certainly think they're going to throw a ton of money at making some very good venues. And, I think the tournament itself will be run very, very well in a very good atmosphere. Whether they switch it to the winter again, we'll see. But I certainly hope there is improvement on the other side of actually preparing and building, for a World Cup. But that was the news coming out of FIFA this week.
Yeah, there always seems to be some type of controversy when it comes to FIFA and selecting these World Cup sites. And yeah, I mean, look, I mean, they pushed the bidding up 3 years. Some people felt like it was a way to just deter other potential countries from throwing their hat into the ring. But like you said, they're definitely going to put a ton of money into this. I mean, they're already putting tons of money into other sports out there, whether it's golf, whether it's Formula One. Exactly. It just, they're continuing to just kind of what they're calling sports wash, if you will. And this is going to be another example of that. So, I mean, I think you'll see probably lavish stadiums and, hopefully nothing like what we saw, in terms of the build up and, the treatment of workers and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it seems to be that FIFA got their way once again.
Seems to be the way it does with that organization. So, well, before we get on to some Premier League news, it's been a busy time. I want to introduce our guest for today. He wrote an excellent article. As I said, we'll talk a little bit about it later on the coach-player relationship. He is currently the vice president of Steel United here at Steel Sports. So I'm really happy to introduce Adam Corlett to the Steel Sports Show. Adam, welcome to the Steel Sports Show, the Youth Sports podcast. Great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to kick off with some Premier League news over the last couple of weeks. I know you are an avid Newcastle fan. So give us your take on what you think. Maybe it's Newcastle. It's a solid mid-table team right now. And let's give us your take on what's been going on in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about the Saudi Arabian World Cup. Obviously, Newcastle is a Saudi-owned club these days, and I think our chairman is the head of the World Cup committee for Saudi Arabia as well. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what links we have from that side of things in terms of the World Cup and Newcastle. But yeah, Newcastle are. I wouldn't say I've hit the panic button yet. I mean, I'm very, we're only 2 points away from sixth. I think the Premier League this year has been an interesting league. It's a fun one to watch. I mean, if you look at the from 6th to 13th, trying to battle to get into those European places, I think there's 3 points that separates Villa in 6th and Manchester United in 13th. So it definitely feels like a season where, one win, you could be up to 6th, and then you have a little slip in form and you're all the way down to mid-table again. So yeah, it's been an interesting season. Definitely some surprise packages. Forest giving me kind of Leicester City vibes from a few years ago. It kind of feels like it's that when are they going to slip up or when are they going to fall off type of mentality. But obviously they haven't yet. They're going strong. Another good win this past weekend against Aston Villa, who are obviously a good team in themselves. So no, it's been interesting to watch, and it's obviously I'd say the biggest talking point probably right now is Manchester City. Obviously they're
I was just going to say
fall from grace, if we want to say that is interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because, everyone's talking about, Liverpool, great season, top of the Premier League, top of the Champions League. Chelsea, everyone was kind of mocking them for the 500 players they've got in their squad, and everyone's thinking, oh, maybe that's the surprise package. So maybe that's the story. Arsenal are a little bit kind of a bit blunt, I will say, in terms of certainly up front. Kind of getting through things, getting some points, but not certainly performing at the level they were last year. So, is that the story? Obviously, United, you got the managerial change. You talked about Forest, but I agree with you. The story of the Premier League right now, I think, is Manchester City and how poor they've been. Obviously, we're recording this the day after the Manchester derby, where they were kind of limping to a 1-0 win and just pressed the self-destruct button completely. And, I don't think I've seen a team at that level, and certainly never seen City before, kind of push that button and just completely fall apart. I mean, United, I was actually, texting with our good friend of Steel Sports, Robbie Earle, who was on as the studio analyst yesterday as we were going by phone. I was said to him, it looked like, and I think they said it on commentary actually during that game, that they were, a month of Sundays they couldn't score. It just didn't look. It looked like United could have played for about 3 weeks and wouldn't score, and then all of a sudden, 2 goals in the last couple of minutes just because of City's self-destruct. And what do you think is going on? You think it's just a kind of a years of this level and without freshening up the squad too much? It's not solely. I mean, people are talking about Rodri, but it's not solely down to Rodri. This team's got other issues, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can put it on just Rodri. I mean, if your entire performance as a club is based off of one player, then particularly for a club like Manchester City, there's something wrong there. I don't know, like you say, and it's not just a Premier League problem. I mean, I think they haven't won in, is it almost 10 games now? I mean, going into the Champions League as well. Beyond that, there's so I mean, there's definitely a lot behind the scenes, and is it a case of obviously last year they won a lot. They've won a lot, in previous years. Is it a case if you can't maintain that competitive edge, and then it's kind of, combined with the injury of Rodri, maybe combined with a few of their top players not really performing well. It's just one of those things that snowballed into something bigger, and it's hard for players to get back to that high level that people like Liverpool and Chelsea seem to be playing at right now. I mean, that could certainly be it. Obviously there was a lot of talk around Guardiola's contract at the start of the season and him not having, much time left. And then he did sign a 1-year extension. And then it seems to be since he signed that extension that it's coincided with it kind of falling apart as well. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of interesting things. I mean, I was listening to the NBC broadcast yesterday, and they were talking about, is Guardiola unsackable? And, is it a case of, has he earned that right to basically
definitely has.
See if he can redirect the ship, which he has. But I also feel like Guardiola is the type of person that is not going to want to be around, something like this. I feel like if he feels like he's impacting it himself, I think he's the type of manager that will, maybe will step aside and allow somebody else to come in. But it's, it's going to be interesting because, I mean, for me, they're definitely out of the title race now, which is crazy to say before Christmas. And you can never say never. I've obviously been a Newcastle fan. I've watched us throw away a 12-point lead at the top of the league and, lose the Premier League to Manchester United. So I know that big swings can happen. But, when you have people like Liverpool, when you have people like Chelsea who are really playing at a high level right now, it almost seems like it's too much for them to come back. So, but yeah, to kind of blame Rodri, I think is short-sighted. If they haven't planned for that, plan for one player leaving or one player getting injured, then I think that's short-sighted on their part.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting. I mean, you got to, I think coming out of the Christmas period, we all know that in the Premier League, that's a big time of year with the number of games. They come back to back. They come so quickly that, as you said, you lose at 1 or 2, you drop some points all of a sudden. People were talking about Liverpool, running away with it, 2 weeks ago, and then they drew at your place at St. James's Park, and then obviously drew on Saturday, although I would certainly argue that was a point gained and 2 points dropped, given that they played 70 minutes without Andrew Robertson after his red card. But, all of a sudden you look at the table and they've got a game in hand, but it's 2 points between them and Chelsea. So, Chelsea certainly, although they struggled a little bit against Brentford yesterday, Cucurella certainly had an interesting couple of weeks with his slips against Chelsea and assists against Chelsea, a goal yesterday. He got sent off after the final whistle yesterday as well. So, Chelsea seem to, they've got the depth of, squad to put a long run together. I certainly think they're the ones to to watch and keep an eye on. But they also haven't had their blip yet, right? So it all depends on how bad these blips are. People keep talking about the Liverpool going to get their blip. Is this their blip? You know, they got two draws. They got Tottenham coming up next week after the Carabao Cup exploits in midweek. So we're going to be seeing. It's going to be an interesting. I think this could be the first year probably since the City Liverpool 1-pointers where we might have a real title. It's been the first time for a while. I think we'll have more than two that getting towards the end of the season might still be in with a good shout. You know, I think I wouldn't write off Arsenal. They've got quality in that team, you know, and as much as City, I can't see it now. Would anybody be surprised if they went on a 12? I mean, right now, no. Yes, they would be, but would anybody be surprised if after Christmas they went on 12, 13 games and, if they picked up somebody in the transfer market, they've got the quality to do so. But I think it'll be fun. It's going to be a fun second part of the season, I think.
Yeah, and I always think it's good to have, that tightness in the top end, right? Usually it's kind of, there's always been that gap between maybe the top 4 or 5 or 6 maybe. And then, your focus has been on the bottom teams, whereas, the bottom seems to be kind of, I mean, Southampton, they might as well just relegate themselves now. I think I don't think they've got any hope of coming back. But obviously sacking Russell Martin as well today or yesterday. So
after the game, him, Gary,
and that's another interesting one as well. From a coaching side of things, obviously, being all realm, the fact that Russell Martin left the pitch before the halftime whistle and then didn't see his side concede the 5th goal of the game in that one. How he, that's an interesting kind of take on. Obviously, you wanted to prepare his halftime team talk and kind of get things set up. Not really sure what you can do when you're 4-0 down at that point. How much your team talk is going to make a difference. But that was an interesting one from a coach's perspective as well.
It was. And speaking of a coach's perspective, while we're on Southampton, it's interesting. I was having a conversation the other day with somebody, and again, Southampton came in, and obviously I watched I don't watch them week in, week out. Being a Liverpool fan, I watch Liverpool's games week in, week out, but I watched them against Southampton. Liverpool were a little fortunate to win that game, but this notion of these championship teams coming up and trying to play, and almost and I get that coaches, they have that philosophy, but surely as a coach, your number one priority when you come up is to survive in the Premier League, right? And it seems to me that these teams are coming up. We saw it with Burnley, I think last year. They're intent on playing this way out of the back, leading to mistakes. They don't have the quality that the top teams do in order to play that way. And I think it's costing them relegations. I think Burnley went down largely because they were stuck to that. Southampton seemed to be very similar. I agree with you. They're on their way back down to the Championship. And it's almost like going back a few years, if you'd seen a Tony Pulis, it's like someone playing that way, a bit of long ball, a bit ugly, survive in the Premier League for a season and then build on that philosophy. I think someone like a Bournemouth is probably a good example of that. They didn't come in and, even though Eddie Howe, when he brought them up, he wasn't playing the football he's playing at Newcastle, or he ended up playing at Bournemouth towards the end of his tenure there. It's I don't know. There seems to be something about these coaches that are coming up from the Championship, and it's just play this way. And if it gets us relegated, it gets us relegated. And I look at it as a fan and from a coaching perspective, it's like, first thing we're going to do is survive, right? Let's survive in the Premier League. Let's see what happens. So what's your take on that?
Well, it makes you wonder whether it's a coach's ego thing for sure. Is it a shop window for the coach? I mean, if you go back to Burnley, right, with Vincent Kompany, was he really doing what he was doing for Burnley, or was he doing for to show Bayern Munich or whoever it would be, who he ended up obviously going to, that this is a style of play that I would implement if I had the players. So it's kind of, it's interesting to kind of to get into it. And obviously they've done well with that style in the Championship. And maybe again, it's an ego of, we won the Championship, or we did well in the Championship with this. And, obviously you'd think that the step up wouldn't be that much of a difference, but, we all know that going from the Championship to the Premier League is a massive jump, and it's not the same. You can get away with it in the Championship where you can't in the Premier League. When you're playing top teams, they're going to punish you. So, I think it is an interesting one. Obviously, Russell Martin at Southampton was playing out from the back. The amount of games I saw where they conceded goals because their players simply can't do it at the level that the Premier League requires. But no changes being made. It's is it a stubbornness thing, or
Yeah.
I know there's that. It's a project. You've got to wait. But if the project gets you relegated and then you lose all the players who you've been building with as a coach because they either go or you have to sell them, you're back to square one anyway. So yeah, I think your example of Bournemouth, Fulham was another one. Back maybe 5-6 years ago, they weren't a pretty team to watch, but they've kind of slowly gone up. They've got some great players now, like Smith Rowe, players like that who can do things. I forget the other guy's name, Wilson, I think it is, who they've got some good players who they've managed to build on top of what they started. So yeah, it's almost
Forest,
like that.
Forest is a
Forest,
good example of that as well. From last year when Cooper had them, they weren't playing as good a football as they are now under Espirito Santo, but they're certainly building on that. So it's interesting for that.
Yeah, Adam, talking about Manchester City, just curious about, I know the Champions League format has changed. They're playing the 8 games now instead of the 6. Could that possibly exacerbate their issues where they're playing a couple more additional games? They haven't been playing well in the Champions League, and maybe that's translating as well to league play. I mean, is that kind of compounding their issues?
Possibly. I mean, I would think that. I mean, I know the players have been very vocal about nobody consults them when people add extra games. The club World Cup, Club World Championship is another one that is an example of that. They've expanded that format, which means more games for some teams as well. And I think it was people like Edison and Allison, I think from Liverpool as well. I think they were very vocal at the start of the season about nobody consults us on these type of things. I'm sure Manchester City aren't looking forward to that side of things, but for a club like Manchester City, you'd think that maybe a couple of games, because they should have the squad depth. I say myself and Martin were actually very lucky to see Manchester City play a preseason friendly this year in New York against AC Milan, and they had a lot of young players. Oscar Bob was on the field, and they've got young players who can play. So you'd think that even if some of those players have gone out on loan, that they would still have a squad that could cope with those extra games. But I think Aston Villa is probably the example of maybe those extra games struggling in terms of they're very much like Newcastle were when we were in the Champions League last season. It's that our squad couldn't handle the extra games, the financial restraints, the PSR meant that we weren't able to maybe spend as much money as Manchester City or Liverpool or whoever it may be to grow our squad. So I think those clubs are struggling, but I don't necessarily think that the format changes would affect City. I just think they're in a slump, and I think it's you wonder about the mentality of these elite teams when all you're used to doing is winning, and you get into this rut of I've lost 5, 6, 7, 8 games in a row. It's like, how do I get out of this? I'm not used to being in this situation. Whereas a team that's maybe lower in the league, or it goes through ebbs and flows. It's kind of that. Well, they've gone through it before. They've gone through it recently. So I think that maybe is more of a Manchester City thing. I just don't think they know how to get back to the simplest form. I think that's the issue. And they've got a lot of players who are just used to winning, and it's finding that competitive edge again to get back to that.
So, Adam, switching gears a little bit, wanted to have you on. You wrote a great article about developing relationships with between the coach and player. Really, really fascinating read. Really enjoyed reading it. We're going to have it in the bio of the show. It'll also be out on LinkedIn this week as well. And I know, before we get to the article, which kind of explores the importance of building trust, mutual respect, professionalism in that coach-player relationship. But interesting, emphasizing that a supportive environment paired with those clear boundaries really kind of creates and fosters that athletic and personal development for both kids and I think coaches. And finding that balance between approachability and professionalism. It's important, if coaches can create that safe, empowering space for players to grow and to develop over time. So give us a little bit of sense of kind of what your coaching, career has kind of brought you to this point. What kind of led you to writing this article, this topic, and how do you think those two things have kind of meshed in your in your coaching career and in your career? I know you're not out on the field as much now, given that you are in overseeing 10 clubs across the country at Steel United, but give us a sense of that.
Yeah, so I mean, my coaching journey started when I was 15. I volunteered with the Newcastle Football Development Scheme, or the Newcastle City Council Football Development Scheme it was at the time, which then became the Newcastle United Football and the Community Program. So I started as a young coach, did some coaching with my local team that I played for, and then it was really at university that I kind of decided that it was going to be my career path. Came over to the US, coached in camps, and then ultimately, ended up staying in the US once I graduated. So, I was over here coaching kind of as my profession as a 19, 20-year-old, working with with kids. And, it's interesting because I kind of said in my article that I've been coaching for, the better part of my life now, in almost 15 years, more than that probably. And it's interesting how I started as thinking about relationships with players, and when I first came over, it was, they had to like me. If they liked me, they were going to do what I wanted them to do. If they did what I wanted them to do, they were going to grow as players. And, I've kind of matured as a coach, but then also gone into different roles as both, an assistant director, as a director in Massachusetts, and then ultimately this position now as the VP of Steel United. I see a lot of our young coaches come in kind of making similar mistakes to maybe I did. And, when I see feedback forms that are given by parents, or maybe their own reflections, it's just that, trying to get across that understanding of that, yes, you want players to like you, but it's not really about liking you. They need to respect you and you need to respect them, because, if all you're doing is trying to create friendships with players and you're trying to create this, this overly positive or naturally positive environment with players, it's difficult for you to then have honest conversations with them. It's difficult for you to provide feedback because you don't want to damage that relationship. Or, a player who thinks that you're their friend may ultimately take it the wrong way because they now think you're criticizing them, and then that relationship impacts. So, the article I wrote was very much about trying to set those boundaries where, you let the player know that you're going to support them. You're going to create this environment that you're going to help them develop. But at the same time, you are their mentor. You are, their coach, and you need to be able to have honest conversations with them and really provide support. So that was essentially a lot for it was. It was just trying to pass on some feedback and some knowledge to some maybe younger coaches coming in to maybe help them get to where I am. So.
And on that note, you mentioned a little bit about mistakes. So what are some of the common mistakes that you think you've seen with new coaches? Obviously, you oversee Steel United, nearly, 75, 100 coaches around the country. What are some of the most common mistakes that that new coaches make, do you think, when trying to build those relationships with their players?
I think, a lot of it is catering to the players' every request. I think is a lot of the one. I don't play defense, I don't play goal, I'm just a striker, and then they try and fit them into systems that maybe don't fit, or they alienate other players because they're potentially showing favoritism with another player just to kind of keep them on side. So I think it's I would say that is one area that I see young coaches struggle in. It's kind of not setting the boundaries of I understand you may be more attack minded, but I'm going to play you here because I want you to understand the defensive game more and how you can be a better attacking player. Could be one. I think it's a case of, well, if I put the kid in defense, then he's not going to like me, so then he's not going to play well, and then he's going to leave the team. And it's almost that worry of I need to get things set straight away as opposed to building a long-term relationship. I think there's a worry that, particularly in the industry we're in, where there is a lot of clubs, a lot of options, they don't want to lose their best players, or they don't want to lose their players to somebody else. So it's kind of, what can I do to make sure that they stick around? And we obviously all know the power of the coach. If you have a good coach, and and families and players like the coach, they're more likely to stay with the club. But I think it does get to that point, particularly if you've coached them from a young age all the way through. It will get to that point where just simply liking the coach isn't enough, and the players realize, well, is this coach supporting my development? Do they have my best interests at heart? Are they going to help me push to get to that next level, whether it be, ECNL, MLS Next, college, whatever it may be. So, if the coach hasn't been able to demonstrate that trust and hasn't been able to communicate that earlier, just because it's a case of I'm going to do things that make you like me, then it's hard to really to switch it at that point. So trying to get it set early is kind of key, and it's difficult because young players, like really young players, don't get that, and that's why a relationship with a parent is also important. And that's another article I wrote. So, but
yeah, I know. I mean, I was going to ask you, as new coaches come in, and they get involved in the game, maybe they played, at a good level. As a new coach coming in, you've got that kind of paradox, right? Where you've got the parent necessarily, you have to kind of cater to. Maybe they're the customer, maybe they're the ones writing the check for their players to play and have the opportunities. They're obviously bringing them to practices, right? They're getting there. So you came to that, and obviously you've got the player themselves. So what advice would you give to a young coach that might feel pressure, to be liked by their players and then also liked by their parents? And I know that's we'll certainly have you on in the future, because I know it's another article you've written about the parent side of this. But what advice to a young coach that's coming in into the game, has played at a good level, is looking at this, is trying to develop themselves as a coach? Would you have to you go in and you feel that pressure because you don't want to be the coach that none of the players or parents like, right? Because then you're wondering, how long am I going to work with this team? So what advice would you give them?
I think communication is key. Like, you have to, I think a lot of coaches sometimes feel like if they can keep the parents at an arm's length, if they can maybe limit the communication with them, and, it's better for them. But really over communicating or consistently communicating is probably the better way. Making sure that you're talking with them consistently, so that, when you're not, or when you're having conversations, it's not just about, the player's development or whatever it may be. It's building that relationship with them, I think, is important. Being transparent, not being afraid to have honest conversations, I think, is important. But I think it's ultimately realizing that parents aren't the enemy. They want the best for their child. So having their support is ultimately going to help you, because they can help you reinforce messages. They can help you with negative situations. If you have to deliver, bad news to a player, or you have to deliver something that could be perceived as negative, having the support of somebody else, particularly their caregiver, can really help you, get that message across in the way that it should be intended, and see it as a development message and not a negative message. But I think the tough thing for a lot of coaches is, we see ourselves as the experts, and we should be the experts in the field. We've trained, we do our licenses, we've played the game, we have an understanding of it. So maybe it's a sense of that they're giving up control, or they're giving up an element of their expertise. And I don't think it's really not about that. It's just about setting boundaries. And it's the same with a player. I think if you can set boundaries of, I am going to do this for you, and if you do this, I will do X, Y, Z. But it's a condition. You have to give your part, I'm going to give my part, as opposed to I'm going to give you everything and I expect nothing in return. I think if you get into that relationship where it's all take and there's no give, it's not mutually beneficial. And I think that's ultimately the relationship you have to have with your players, you have to have with parents, is that, yes, I'm providing you with a service, particularly in the pay-to-play model in the US. We understand that you are paying a lot, that travel is becoming more, that what we're asking, the seasons have now stretched from just the fall to year round. It's like, we're expecting you to do a lot, but you have to trust me, but this is what we're going to do, and we create those boundaries. So I think honest, transparent communication and setting boundaries early is really the key to a healthy relationship.
Talking about your journey in becoming a coach, and you said you started out really young at 15. I started when I was 17. My first year coaching was when I was 17. And, so what, as a young coach, and certainly we want to get more younger coaches into the fold. And, if someone's interested in coaching, we want to, foster that journey and help them grow. So, I mean, from your experience, what kind of lessons can you give? What kind of advice can you give those younger coaches in, making sure they're successful?
So I think the first thing is just being involved. So I was lucky that I had the opportunity to start when I was so young, because we have a program in the UK called work experience, which is something you do in high school. So it's basically you actually leave school for a week, you go and you work in an industry that you think you might want to go into, and then ultimately you write a project on it at the end. So I knew that I wanted to do something in sport. So I actually reached out to Newcastle United, cheekily trying to see if I could watch some first team practices. That was literally what I wanted to do. I thought, if I can go watch Newcastle for a week and make it seem like I'm at school, then it'll be ideal. But the goalkeeping coach at the time is a guy called Simon Smith, who was also the England goalkeeping coach. He actually took the time to write me back and say, listen, we can't do it, obviously, for a variety of reasons, but this is an organization that I know helps young coaches get started, and it was the foundation of Newcastle United. So I got into that, just volunteered to start with, just to see whether I liked it, and it was something that I really took on. I knew I wasn't going to be a professional player. I knew that I knew that I still wanted to play. I wasn't, this wasn't me giving up my playing, and I think that's an important thing for young players to realize is you can get into coaching and not give up playing. It's not an either or situation. I knew that I wasn't going to be a pro player, so I was kind of like, I still want to be involved in the game somehow. I still want to, potentially be in the higher levels, but not as a player. So that was kind of an avenue I took. But I just volunteered and learned off new coaches. And I think that if anybody out there, any players out there have a slight interest or they think they might do it, it's talk to your coach. Can I come and help you with a younger team or another team that you coach? Or does your club offer the opportunity for me to come in and either work with the young kids or shadow coaches, and just see if it's something you enjoy? Because it is a rewarding career. It's a hard career. It's there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, and there's a lot of dedication and hours, but it's definitely an enjoyable career as well. So I think really that would be my message, is just get out there and try it. And, ultimately, recognize that if it's something you want to do, you're going to have a lot of support out there, whether it be through, if it's a steel player, for example, we have the opportunity for them to jump on grassroots courses that we run to help them get their licenses. We offer internship programs where they can kind of get into that, the off-field side of things as well as the on-field. So it's really just taking advantage of those opportunities for sure.
I'm a little bit older than you, so I didn't have to worry about social media when I was a coach.
Yeah.
Now that we have social media, it's everywhere. How do you navigate some of those challenges with social media, where your coaches are on social media, your players are now on social media, you're kind of blending the two. How do you navigate those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because obviously it's social media is extremely powerful in a lot of things, but it can also be negative as well as positive. And one of the rules that I've always had is I never follow my players, or I never follow my players when they were my players. I always waited until either they left me or they were adults. So I think all of the players that I may have on Instagram or whatever it may be are now in college, and essentially it's my way of keeping in contact with them, checking in on their college careers. So I think that, I try and limit my engagement with players as much as I can. I try and stick to, maybe things like, the official Steel channels that we have, and use it as, that way to engage with players, because, it is a slippery slope. And I think that when you do have, players on social media, it's it gets into that friendship thing as well. They associate social media with their friends, and if they have their coach on there, that must mean my coach is a friend, and it starts to blur that boundary a little bit. And I think that's something that's important to set. And I do the same with parents. I limit parents on my social media as well, because I don't want them to have this inkling that, well, Adam's my friend, so my kid can't, receive this, feedback, or, my kid can't be moved on to this team for their development, or whatever it may be. So, but having said that, we also know the power of social media, that it can be used to help get players recruited. We put highlights on our social media, not just for, our own little goal of the month competitions, but to show good work that our players have done and praise them. So, it's a tough balance for sure. But I think that, again, as it is with the communication side of things, there just has to be boundaries, and they have to be clearly communicated. And it can't be one rule for one rule for another. It's this is how I'm going to operate, and I want you to respect that. And ultimately, it's the same for the players. There's a lot of times where coaches may try to add players on Instagram, and they may not want it, but the player may feel pressured to accept them because it's their coach. And if the coach, if I don't accept their friendship, what does that mean? This, that, and the other. And we've got to respect their privacy as well as asking them to respect ours. I think it has to go both ways.
And coaching's been obviously a huge part of your life. Not just soccer, but teaching soccer and helping young people grow off the field as well. So how has coaching been so impactful to your life growing up and now in your professional career?
I think it's one of those things where it's initially it was just a way for me to stay within soccer, right? It was kind of like I wanted a pathway in which I wasn't really playing as much anymore, but I wasn't ready to give up the game. But then as I kind of, got into it, I realized that through me playing, which obviously involves me having a coach, which involves, I had the same coach for 11 years as a kid. And he was just a parent volunteer. But he was able to create an environment where I made a lot of friends. I was able to, achieve success. I played on a very good team, and we were able to, to win things. But I also, we had years where we weren't good, and we had challenges. So it helped me deal with kind of that, that disappointment side of things. So, I learned a lot of lessons playing. And as I matured as a coach, I realized that I could use that to impact my players as well. And it wasn't just about, what was happening on the field. So I tried to tailor a lot of what I did, particularly my team talks around using what had happened on the field to grow. And, you obviously you don't want to get, too preachy and be like, this just happened, and, you're going to all be better people because of it, and this, that, and the other. But it's about, being organic. And, whenever there was an opportunity to talk about, maybe, a loss that the players felt unfair, it was kind of trying to relate that back to, this might be something that happens in life, and, and this is just part of it, and trying to get them into that. But, that was a big one for me. It's, I realized that it wasn't just about the game and, enjoying the game, but sport does, and obviously not just soccer, any sport, particularly when you're in a team sport, it gives you so much that you don't actually realize until you sit back and reflect on it, and I think that's the power of youth sport. It's like right now, the players that we coach, do they understand that what they're doing is helping them build characteristics like resilience, or it's helping them, learn reflective skills? Probably not. They're just thinking about playing with their friends. But, the hope is that, when they turn, 16, 17, 18 or graduate high school, and they look back on it, they're like, actually, you know what, doing that, and, the coach that I had really set me up to be able to deal with, some of the things that I'm dealing with right now. And, that's the hope. Well, that should be the hope for all of us as youth sports coaches. Particularly when maybe we're not in the higher levels like the MLS Next, and it's not all about, the trying to get players into the professional level. It's about development of people as well.
That's right. There's definitely some real good takeaways, Adam. It's an excellent article. I ask everyone to take a few minutes to read it. Really enjoyed listening to how you came about with that article, that topic, your coaching journey. Appreciate all the work that you do at Steel United with all of our athletes. And really thanks for coming on and spending the time with us on the Steel Sports Show. I do finish with a stat of the show. I did find one, Nathan, today. Kind of wanted to find one related in this aspect of Adam's article. So the stat of the show is 10, and that is that in player-coach relationships in youth sports is that kids are 10 times more likely to stay involved in sports when they feel their coach genuinely cares about them as a person, not just as a player. So I think to Adam's point in his article, definitely the data also says that with kids 10 times more likely to stay involved when they feel that there is a positive developmental relationship going on with their coach as well. So Adam, thank you for your time. Nathan, as always, this is our last show of season 1 of the Steel Sports Show. We will be back January 22nd, recording our first one, the week of January 22nd. We will be out with the episode 1 of season 2. So to Nathan, Adam, thank you. And to everyone listening, we hope you have a really great holiday season. We wish everybody a happy new year. And, we look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. Thanks and take care. We'll see you soon.